My parents sold my gaming setup to pay for my sister's shopping, so I moved out and never returned. Now they can't reach me. I'm a 22-year-old guy, and I've always known my sister was the golden child. Honestly, it wasn't even subtle. From the time we were kids, it was like she could do no wrong, while everything I did was either ignored or criticized. I used to tell myself it was just in my head, but the older I got, the clearer it became. She was the sun, and I was the shadow. When I turned 10, I remember asking for a bike for my birthday. I'd been dreaming about it for months. That morning, I came downstairs to find nothing. My parents shrugged it off, saying money was tight. 2 weeks later, it was my sister's 8th birthday, and she got a brand new dollhouse bigger than my actual bed. They laughed as she unwrapped it, snapping photos, while I sat in the corner pretending not to care. It kept happening. When I brought home report cards filled with A's, they'd barely look up from their phones. But when my sister got a participation ribbon for a school talent show, the whole family went out for ice cream to celebrate her achievement. I'd stand there, clapping along, telling myself that if I just worked harder, maybe I'd earn the same kind of love. Spoiler, I never did. I got used to swallowing the disappointment, to keeping my head down, to accepting that no one would notice my quiet wins. But deep inside, the resentment piled up like layers of dust. I didn't hate my sister. She was just soaking up what was handed to her. What cut the deepest was realizing my parents chose this imbalance every single day. I wish I could say I stopped caring, but the truth is, that kind of neglect changes you. And in my case, it changed me in ways I didn't even recognize until much later. And the real breaking point? That came years later, when all the little unfair moments built into something I could never forgive. By the time I hit my teens, I realized I needed an escape, somewhere that wasn't measured against my sister's shopping bags or my parents' approval. That escape turned out to be gaming. It started small, a hand-me-down console from a friend who'd upgraded. The graphics were clunky, the controller was taped together, but for the first time I felt in control of something. I could slip into a world where my choices mattered, where I wasn't the invisible child sitting on the sidelines. Slowly, I started saving every dollar I could. Babysitting gigs, cutting lawns, bagging groceries, whatever paid. I wasn't buying shoes or new clothes. Every cent went into building my setup. Piece by piece, it grew. First a decent monitor, then a better graphics card, eventually a custom desk I built myself. My room became my sanctuary. While my sister strutted around with new handbags and the latest phone gifted from our parents, I was building something that was actually mine. It wasn't just a hobby. It was proof I could create a life outside their favoritism, but of course they didn't see it that way. To them, it was just wasting time. My mom would stand at my door and sigh dramatically. "Are you still glued to that thing? Go outside. Be normal." And my sister? She'd poke her head in just to smirk. "You know no girl is going to want a guy who hides behind a screen, right?" I'd laugh it off, but deep down, those words stung. Because they weren't just mocking my hobby, they were mocking the one place I actually felt like myself. Still, I held on. No matter how much they rolled their eyes, I thought, at least they can't take this from me. I didn't realize how wrong I was. The first real red flag came one night at dinner. I was shoveling down leftovers, half listening to my sister brag about some random shopping trip, when my mom suddenly said, "You know, maybe you should think about selling that computer of yours. It could actually help the family." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "What?" "No, I bought that with my own money." Dad chimed in without looking up from his plate. "Don't be so dramatic. You're not using it for anything important anyway. At least your sister's things get put to use." My chest tightened. I wanted to yell that my gaming setup wasn't just some toy. It was my pride, my work, my sanity. But I bit my tongue. I'd learned arguing only made things worse. Later that night, my sister came into my room uninvited, leaning against the doorframe with that smug grin. "You should just give it up. Nobody cares about your little screens." I clenched my fists. "Get out," she laughed, tossing her hair. "Touchy, touchy. Guess someone doesn't like hearing the truth." Her words replayed in my head for hours after she left. Truth? No, it wasn't truth. It was cruelty disguised as casual teasing. But what really shook me wasn't her. It was my parents. That was the first time they'd openly suggested taking away something I had worked for. It didn't feel like a joke. It felt like a warning. I remember lying awake that night, staring at the ceiling, this sick knot in my stomach. I told myself they wouldn't actually do it. that even they had to respect that I'd earned it. But a small voice in my head whispered, "You're not the golden child." Respect was never part of the deal, and that voice turned out to be right. I'll never forget the day it happened. I came home from work, sweaty, exhausted, with dirt under my fingernails from a landscaping shift, and walked into my room. My heart dropped. My desk was empty. My chair pushed aside like someone had swept through in a hurry. Everything was gone. My monitor, my PC tower, my headset, even the little LED lights I'd taped around my desk. Stripped bare, like my sanctuary had never existed. I remember just standing there, my backpack sliding off my shoulder and hitting the floor with a thud. For a second, I thought maybe I'd been robbed. But then I heard laughter downstairs. I stormed into the living room, my chest pounding. My sister was twirling in a brand new designer jacket, holding up bags from stores I could never even afford to walk into. My parents were smiling at her like she was royalty. "Where's my stuff?" My voice cracked louder than I wanted it to. My mom didn't even flinch. "Oh, we sold it." "Your sister needed new clothes for school." "Sold it." Just like that. Like it was a blender they didn't use anymore. "You what?" My hands were shaking. "That was mine. I worked for that." Dad waved me off like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "It's just games." "Stop overreacting," I looked at my sister. She smirked, clutching her shopping bags tighter, almost daring me to say something. "Don't be jealous," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. It felt like someone had punched me in the gut. Years of saving, every late-night shift, every dollar scraped together, it had all been erased in one selfish decision. And the worst part wasn't even losing the gear. It was realizing that my parents saw my hard work as worthless. While her entitlement was priceless, I couldn't even breathe. And in that moment, I knew things would never go back to normal. I don't even remember moving my feet. But suddenly I was screaming in the middle of the living room. All that bottled up anger from years of being second best just ripped out of me. "How could you do this to me? That was mine! I worked for every single piece." My voice cracked so hard I barely recognized it. My mom's face hardened. "Lower your tone. We're your parents. We don't owe you an explanation. You don't owe me an explanation? You just stole everything I worked for and gave it to her like it was pocket change." I pointed at my sister, who was sprawled across the couch, scrolling through her phone like none of this mattered. She glanced up, rolled her eyes, and said in the most mocking voice, "Relax, it's just video games. I actually need clothes."
You don't need...
Whatever that was. Something inside me snapped. "You're a spoiled brat. You don't need anything, you just take because you know they'll give it to you." Dad slammed his hand on the coffee table. "Enough, stop yelling at your sister. You should be ashamed of how selfish you sound." "Selfish?" I could feel my chest burning. "I've never asked you for a dime. I paid for everything myself. Meanwhile, she gets handed a new life every week and you still act like she's the victim." The room went silent for a moment. My mom's lips pressed into a thin line. My dad glared like I'd just committed a crime. And my sister, she laughed. Actually laughed. That laugh cut deeper than anything. Because it wasn't just her mocking me, it was proof that none of them took me seriously. Not then. Not ever. And for the first time, I wondered if I even belonged in that house anymore. After that night, something in me shut down. I stopped yelling, stopped fighting, stopped even trying to explain myself. What was the point? They'd already decided my feelings didn't matter. Days turned into weeks, and I barely spoke a word at home. I'd eat dinner in silence, push food around my plate, and retreat to my now empty room. No monitor glow, no quiet hum of the PC, just blank walls staring back at me. My parents acted like nothing had happened. My mom hummed in the kitchen, my dad buried himself in work, and my sister paraded her new wardrobe through the house like she was on a runway. Every laugh, every "look what I got," felt like a slap in the face. One evening, I overheard her talking on the phone with a friend. Yeah, my brother freaked out. Like, literally cried over some stupid games. Pathetic, right? Her laughter echoed down the hall. I pressed my fists against my temples until I thought I'd explode. But instead of blowing up again, I went quiet. Dead quiet. At school, friends asked why I wasn't online anymore. "Just busy," I lied, forcing a smile. Inside, I was drowning. At night, I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, the silence louder than any argument. I replayed every insult, every dismissal, every time they'd chosen her over me. My mind whispered the same cruel thought over and over. "You don't matter here. You never did. That realization didn't make me angry this time. It made me cold, detached. I started thinking less about fixing things, and more about leaving them behind completely, and once that seed was planted, it wouldn't stop growing. I thought things couldn't get any worse after they sold my setup, but I was wrong. Way wrong. One Saturday afternoon, I walked to the bank to check on my small savings account. I'd been tucking away every extra dollar from my part-time shifts, money I'd planned to use either to rebuild my setup or maybe even put toward moving out someday. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The one thing they couldn't touch. Or so I thought. I handed the teller my card, punched in my info, and waited. She frowned. There's only $40 left in this account. I felt my stomach drop. That can't be right. There should be almost $2,000 in there. She showed me the transactions and my blood ran cold. Large withdrawals, hundreds at a time over the past 2 months. I recognized the dates. They matched perfectly with the times my sister had shown up with brand new outfits, accessories, and that ridiculous high-end purse she wouldn't stop posting about online. I rushed home, clutching the bank slip like it was a death sentence. "Where's my money?" I demanded the second I walked through the door. My mom looked annoyed. "Don't start. We borrowed it for bills." "Bills?" I shoved the paper at her. "You mean her shopping sprees?" My sister smirked from the couch, twirling her hair. "Relax, you'll make it back. You're always working anyway." I wanted to scream, to tear the whole house down with my bare hands. Instead, I just stood there, my legs shaking so badly I thought they'd give out. Because this wasn't just about games anymore. They hadn't just taken my escape, they'd stolen my future, and that's when it hit me. As long as I stayed in that house, they'd keep bleeding me dry. Something inside me shifted. And for the first time, I started seriously planning my way out. After the savings incident, there was no pretending anymore. I walked around the house with this permanent tightness in my chest, like I was holding back a scream every second of the day. One night, I finally lost it. Mom cornered me in the kitchen, lecturing me about how I should be more supportive of my sister. I snapped. "Supportive? You stole my money? You sold my stuff. What exactly have you ever supported me with?" Her eyes went cold. "Don't twist this. Your sister has real potential. You're wasting yours hiding in a dark room." I laughed bitterly, my voice shaking. "Real potential? You mean blowing through cash like it grows on trees? That's not potential, that's entitlement." Dad shuffled in, looking tired. He didn't even meet my eyes. "Enough. Stop fighting with your mother." I wanted him to stand up for me, to just once admit they'd gone too far. But he just kept staring at the floor like the coward he always was. That was it. Something inside me snapped. I went to my room, bare, stripped of everything I loved, and grabbed a duffel bag. I shoved in clothes, my wallet, my headphones. That's all I had left. As I zipped it up, my hands shook so bad I almost couldn't close it. My heart was pounding, my breath short, but underneath it all was this strange calm. Because I knew. I knew I couldn't stay another day in a place where I was nothing but a wallet. Nothing but background noise to their golden child, and even though I didn't have a clear plan yet, I promised myself I'd get out, no matter what it took. I thought I'd already hit my breaking point, but rock bottom has a way of digging its claws in deeper than you expect. It happened on a Friday night. I came home from a late shift, sweaty and bone-tired, only to hear music blasting from the house. My sister had thrown a party. Laughter spilled out the open windows, the smell of cheap perfume and alcohol stinging my nose before I even stepped inside. I pushed through the crowded living room, trying to ignore the strangers in my house. That's when I heard her voice, loud, clear, and cutting straight through the noise. "Don't mind him," she told a group of her friends as I walked by. "That's just my brother, the one who cried when Mom sold his toys." The room erupted with laughter. My face burned and I froze. One guy actually pointed at me, grinning, like I was some kind of punchline. I wanted to shout, to throw something, to remind them I wasn't some pathetic loser. But the words stuck in my throat. My own parents were sitting in the corner, sipping drinks, smiling like this was all normal. Like humiliating me in front of strangers was entertainment. I felt the laughter wrap around me like a noose, choking me. My chest ached, my vision blurred, and before I knew it, I was stumbling upstairs to my room. I collapsed on my bed, empty desk staring back at me, walls silent, and for the first time in years, I cried. Not out of anger, but out of pure hopelessness. because in that moment I finally understood. I wasn't just unwanted in that house. I was invisible. A ghost, and ghosts don't fight. They just fade. But even in that pit of despair, something else was quietly forming inside me. Not hope. Not yet, something colder. Something sharper. That night after the party, I lay awake staring at the ceiling until the sun came up. My pillow was damp, my throat raw from holding back sobs, but my mind was clear in a way it had never been before. The humiliation, the theft, the laughter, and it had burned. Away any last thread tying me to that house. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in months. My friend, Ryan. He'd always been the one person who saw through my I'm fine act. My thumb hovered for a moment before I hit call. "Hey, man," I whispered, my voice breaking. I can't stay here anymore. Do you still have that couch?" Without hesitation, he said, "Come over, anytime, just come." The relief nearly buckled my knees. For the first time in weeks, I felt a tiny flicker of safety. Over the next few days, I became a ghost in my own home. I came and went without a sound. Every paycheck, I set aside cash in a small envelope I kept hidden behind a loose floorboard. I sold what little I had left that was mine. A pair of old sneakers. A few games I'd kept on a thumb drive. Anything to scrape together enough to start over. I rehearsed my escape in my head. Slip out after dark. Leave nothing behind they could use against me. Take only what I truly needed. Every time my sister flaunted a new purchase or my mom gave me that disappointed look, my resolve hardened. I wasn't going to yell anymore. I wasn't going to beg. I was just going to disappear, and they wouldn't even see it coming. The night I finally left didn't feel heroic. It felt like sneaking out of a crime scene. It was just after midnight. The house was dark except for the faint blue glow from the TV in the living room where my dad had fallen asleep. My sister's door was shut. Muffled music thumped behind it. I moved quietly, stuffing the last of my clothes into a duffel bag, my hands shaking so badly I could barely zip it. Every sound felt amplified. The squeak of the floorboards. The jingle of my keys, my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I paused at my doorway for a second, looking at the room that had once been my sanctuary. Now it was just 4 blank walls and an empty desk. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say goodbye. I just slung the bag over my shoulder, took one last deep breath, and walked down the hallway. Halfway to the door, my mom's voice floated from the kitchen, groggy and sharp. "Where are you going?" I froze, then forced my voice steady. Out where?" she demanded, but I didn't answer. I turned the knob and stepped into the cool night air. For a moment, standing there on the porch with my bag, I felt weightless. Terrified, yes, my entire body trembling with adrenaline, but also free, like a bird whose cage door had been left open. I walked down the street without looking back. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't check it. I just kept walking, one step at a time toward Ryan's apartment and whatever waited for me beyond that. Behind me, the house stayed dark and silent, and for the first time in my life, so did I. Ryan's apartment was small, cluttered, and smelled faintly of takeout and laundry detergent, but to me it felt like a palace. He handed me a blanket and pointed to the couch. "It's not much," he said, "but it's yours." I sank into the cushions, the weight of my duffel bag at my feet, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was intruding in my own life. I could actually breathe. The silence here wasn't hostile. It was peace. Of course, starting over wasn't glamorous. My bedroom was a sagging couch. My possessions fit into a single bag, and every dollar I earned had to stretch to the breaking point. I worked extra shifts at the landscaping job, sometimes coming home with blistered hands and dirt caked under my nails. But at least when I dropped onto that couch, exhausted, it was mine. Nobody could take it away. On weekends, I helped Ryan out with rent in small ways, buying groceries, paying part of the electric bill. It wasn't much, but it felt good to contribute to a place where I wasn't treated like a burden. Slowly, I started piecing myself back together. I bought a secondhand console off a guy online. Nothing fancy, but enough to feel like I had a piece of myself again. The first night I plugged it in, the familiar hum filled the room and my chest loosened in a way I hadn't felt since before everything was ripped away. My online friends welcomed me back like I'd never left. "Dude, where have you been?" one asked through the headset. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile they couldn't see. Long story, I said, but deep down I knew it wasn't just about games anymore. It was about proving I could build something again, even if it was from zero. It didn't take long before they noticed I was gone. At first it was just calls and texts, dozens of them. My mom demanding I come home right now, my dad sending short, guilt-laced messages like, "You're worrying your mother." My sister even chimed in, "You left me to deal with everything alone." So selfish, I ignored them. I blocked numbers, muted group chats, but they found ways to get through. Fake accounts on social media, messages through mutual friends, even random emails with subject lines like, "This is your last chance." The more I ignored them, the more desperate they got. One afternoon, I was stocking shelves at the hardware store where I'd picked up a second job when I saw my mom walk in. My stomach dropped. She spotted me instantly and marched over, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You think you can just abandon your family?" she hissed. "Do you have any idea what this is doing to us?" I clenched my jaw, keeping my hands busy with boxes. "You sold my things. You stole my money. Don't talk to me about family." Her face twisted in outrage, but before she could respond, my dad appeared behind her. Quieter, but no less insistent. "Son, just come home. Let's talk this out," I shook my head. "No, I'm done talking." They followed me to the parking lot, their voices rising, but I kept walking. Ryan was waiting in his beat-up car, engine running. I climbed in without looking back, heart hammering. As we pulled away, my mom's voice faded into the distance, still shouting after me. That was the moment I realized something. They weren't trying to bring me home because they missed me. They were trying because, without me, they'd lost their safety net. It finally boiled over a few weeks later. They'd been circling me like vultures. Messages, random appearances at my job, even cornering Ryan once in the parking lot asking where I was. I knew it was only a matter of time before they showed up somewhere I couldn't avoid. That day came on a Sunday afternoon. I was walking out of the grocery store with a bag of ramen and instant coffee when I saw them waiting by the car. My mom's arms were crossed, my dad stiff beside her, and my sister, of course, standing there in a brand new outfit like this was all about her. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to keep walking. "Enough of this nonsense," Mom snapped. "You're coming home. Now." I stopped, gripping the grocery bag so tight the plastic bit into my fingers. "No, I'm not. You're destroying this family," she shot back, her voice sharp enough to draw stares from people passing by. I laughed bitterly. "I'm destroying it? You sold my life for shopping bags. You drained my savings for her whims. Don't pretend this is about family, it's about control." My dad stepped forward, his voice low but pleading. "Son, please! Let's not do this in public, but I was done hiding." My voice rose, shaking but steady. "You never saw me as your son. You saw me as a wallet. And you—" I turned to my sister, who was rolling her eyes. "You treated me like trash because you knew they'd let you." "Well, guess what? I'm done." For the first time, none of them had a response. My mom's face flushed. My dad looked like he'd swallowed something sour. And my sister's smirk faltered just slightly. I turned, climbed into Ryan's car, and drove off. And for once, I wasn't the one left standing speechless. I thought cutting them off would be the end of it. But karma has a way of finishing what you can't. Months passed. I was grinding through 2 jobs, saving every penny, slowly piecing together a life that was actually mine. One evening, Ryan slid his phone across the table while we ate instant noodles. "Dude, you need to see this." It was a post from a mutual friend back in town. A rant about how my parents were drowning in debt. Apparently, my sister had maxed out multiple credit cards, shopping like the money would never run out. Designer bags, spa trips, even some luxury retreat she bragged about online. And when the bills came due, there was no me left to quietly clean up the mess. I scrolled through the comments. People whispering about repossessed cars, unpaid utilities, and my parents begging distant relatives for loans. My sister's friends had stopped hanging out with her too. Nobody wanted to be dragged into her financial black hole. For a moment, I just sat there staring at the screen. A part of me felt pity. These were still my parents, my blood. But then I remembered standing in my gutted room hearing my mom say, "We sold it for your sister." I remembered the laughter, the mockery, the tears on my pillow, and suddenly that pity turned into something colder. Not joy exactly, but a deep, quiet satisfaction. They'd always treated me like I didn't matter. Now they were learning what life was like without me, and I wasn't about to swoop in and save them this time. It's been over a year since I left, and I haven't stepped foot back in that house. Not once. Sometimes, late at night, I catch myself wondering if I should feel guilty. Should I have stayed? Tried harder to fix things? But then I remember how it felt to come home to an empty desk, or to hear my own parents laugh while my sister mocked me in front of strangers. And the guilt evaporates. Now I live in a tiny apartment I share with 2 other roommates. It's cramped, the walls are thin, and the faucet drips no matter how many times the landlord fixes it. But it's mine. I pay my share of the bills. I keep my own keys. And when I walk through the door at the end of a shift, nobody looks at me like I'm a disappointment. I've been saving steadily. Got myself a decent little setup again. Nothing fancy, but enough. And every time I sit down, controller in hand, I smile. Not because of the game itself, but because it reminds me that I built this life from scratch. Nobody can take it from me now. Every few weeks, my parents still try to reach out. Emails, blocked numbers, even a letter once. The message is always the same, and we miss you, come home. Your sister needs you. I read them, then set them aside. Because I know the truth, they don't miss me. They miss what I gave them. I used to think losing my setup was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Now I realize it was the push I needed to break free. I may have lost my family, but in the end, I found something better. I found myself.